Welcome, students, to the first chapter from your first flight, Class 10 syllabus Cbse, subject English language and literature. So, today's class will be an online class, and I would suggest you sit down with a notebook and pen and do write down the things which you see, which you can read on the screen, and take down the important points, for you will have to make a note on it for the assignment given after the video, which you need to write it down in your fair notebook as well. So, uh, without wasting much time, let us get on with it. So, the first chapter name is A Letter to God, written by the author G. L. Fuentes. And this is a prose, and it goes on like this. They say faith can move mountains, but what should we put our faith in? This is the question this story delicately poses. So you can understand that the theme of this story in hand will be faith. And this is exactly the title of the story also, A Letter to God, and it questions the faith that the farmer Lenko will possess. Because there once lived a farmer named Lenko. Some of you may say it as Lencho also, but we will go with Lenko for now. He lived in a in a valley with his family. That year he had cultivated corn or maize, whatever you say. Some of you like to eat popcorn also, yeah. So that is what he was cultivating. The flowers that dotted the field promised a good harvest. Lenko waited for good rain or at least a shower to get a good harvest. Rain came and all, including Lenko, enjoyed the light shower. These aren't raindrops raining from the sky, but they are new coins, was what Lenko remarked. Lenko, who was cultivating corn in his fields, he was hopeful of a good harvest, and that would only become a reality if it rained, or at least if there was a shower, then he would get a good harvest. And to his happiness and joy, it rained. There was a light shower, and he was happy enough to remark that those showers weren't just raindrops, but they were new coins, coins which would bring him wealth, prosperity, and sustain his family. So, this is the kind of visual, a cornfield that belonged to Lenko. But suddenly a strong wind began to blow, and along with the rain, very large hailstones began to fall. These truly did resemble new silver coins. It was really getting bad. Lenko hoped that it passed quickly. It did not pass quickly. For an hour the hail rained on the house, the garden, the hillside, the cornfield, on the whole valley. The field was white as if covered with salt. Not a leaf remained on the trees. The corn was totally destroyed. The flowers were gone from the plants. Lenko's soul was filled with sadness. When the storm had passed, he stood in the middle of the field. So, this was the tragedy that struck them. A tragedy which, like a drought, because this year Unlike a drought, it rained, but still, along with rain, it hailed also. And these hails were big enough to damage all the crops and to kill all the plants in his field because now they were frost bitten. All the crops were covered with ice and hail, and the field was full, fully white as if covered with a blanket of salt. And thus there was melancholy and gloom in Lenko's soul. He was very sad and worried for his family and for his livelihood. So, this might be the picture which suggests what had happened to the field of Lenko, the cornfield which was destroyed by hail. But in his heart there was a single hope, as sometimes we also, and many people, when everything else fails, they have they pray to God and they believe in God and they hope for a miracle. So, Lenko was an ox of a man. Now you might ask, why is this Lenko was an ox of a man has been marked in red? Well, it has been done to make you aware of the figure of speech used in this sentence. And the figure of speech used in this sentence, because we are comparing Lenko with an ox, and an ox gives out the qualities of hard work and strength. Therefore, Lenko is being given the qualities of an ox, and he is compared to an animal, a beast of burden, ox, without using like or as. And this is a figure of speech used in language and literature to make the sentence more expressive and more fun to read. So, Lenko, who was an ox of a man, who was working like an animal in the fields, but still he knew how to write. He knew how to write. Because even in our country, India, we can't say that all our farmers are literate, all know how to read and write. It is not the case. Statistics will show us that there is still a large part of the Indian populace which are have not got the good fortune to read and write till now. The following Sunday at daybreak, what happened? So, as he began to write a letter, he was writing a letter to God, which he himself would carry to town and place in the mail. It was nothing less than the letter to God. So, following Sunday, he wrote a letter to God and he went and he posted it in the post office. And in the letter, what did he write? He wrote, God, if you don't help me, my family and I will go hungry this year. I need 100 pesos in order to sow my field again and to live until the crop comes because of the hailstorm. So when he says pesos, you can understand that this might this story might have occurred in Mexico or some country in South America, because that is where they use the currency pesos. And he simply wrote the truth, whatever was the reality, that he needed 100 pesos in order to survive with his family and to sow the crop in order to reap the harvest for next year. Because on that year, his entire field had been destroyed because of the hailstorm. He wrote on the envelope to God, he put the letter inside, and still troubled went to town. So he was troubled. and he posted it in the post office. Now, the postman, whose job is to collect and distribute, when he saw the letter written addressed to God, he almost broke out laughing. He was in laughter, and he immediately turned serious and tapping the letter on his desk commented, "What faith! I wish I had who wrote this letter." So he, although he was in laughter, but still he admired the faith which Lenko possessed, because he had the grit and confidence to start up a correspondence with God, to start a means of communication through letters with God. That means correspondence. So, in order not to shake the writer's faith in God, the postmaster came up with an idea, and what he did, his idea was to answer the letter. But when he opened it, it was evident that to answer it, he needed something more than goodwill, ink and paper. Something more was required rather than just writing some philosophical thoughts and giving some good advice in the paper, because the letter demanded what was the need of the hour for Lenko. But he stuck to his resolution that he would help this man in need, because he did not want to break the trust that Lenko had in God. He asked for money from his employees, part of his salary, and he also donated a part of his salary. He asked all his friends and everyone of his colleagues to donate little a bit of amount for Lenko. So every some several of his friends were obliged to give something, because it was for a good cause, for an act of charity. Like in this instance also, because of COVID-19, even our school, all the staff from our school has also donated for the COVID-19 patients, and everyone has contributed for a good cause. That is what everyone should do. So it was impossible, but in spite of all his efforts, it was impossible for the postmaster to gather together the 100 pesos which Lenko had asked for. So he was able to send the farmer only a little more than half, that is 70 pesos. He had collected 70 pesos, so what he did, he put the money in an envelope addressed to Lenko, and with it a letter containing only a single word. No explanation was given, the amount was given, and a signature was given, God. Now, the following Sunday, Lenko came a bit earlier than usual to ask if there was a letter for him. The postman handed the letter to him. The postmaster was filled with contentment of a man who had performed a good deed, and he looked on from his office. So, the postmaster who had done a good deed, he was contented and he was joyful at the work he had done, and he looked at Lenko from his office to see the reaction that Lenko would give. And to his surprise, he saw that Lenko was not the slightest surprise on seeing the money. Such was his confidence. But in fact, he became angry when he counted the money. Postmaster, he saw that Lenko was not happy. He was not surprised, and he admired Lenko that he had that level of confidence on God. And in fact, Lenko had become angry after counting the money. Why? Let let us read on. God could not have made a mistake, nor could he have denied Lenko what he had requested. Immediately, Lenko went up to the window to ask for paper and ink. He wrote another letter to God, and the moment the letter fell into the mailbox, the postmaster went to open it. It said, God, of the money that I asked for, only 70 pesos reached me. Send me the rest, since I need it very much, but don't send it to me through the mail because the post office employees are a bunch of crooks. And he signed it Lenko. So, after getting the money, he wrote another letter to God, and in that, he vented out his frustration. He vented out, he, he believed in God that God had fulfilled his part of the request, but he showed his anger that he did not trust the post office people who in fact had actually helped Lenko because the amount he had asked for was 100 pesos and the amount he had received from God was only 70, and Lenko assumed that the people from the post office must have stolen 30 pesos, and that is why he blamed them as crooks. So he asked God to send him the remaining amount but not through mail. What does the author want to highlight? In this story, Fuentes, the author wants to highlight the immense power in man's innocent faith in God, which is also the theme of our story. It teaches us that if man has childlike faith in God, he can accomplish anything considered impossible. So, this is what this chapter teaches us, that if we have the faith in God like a child, then that man, through the power of his belief and faith, can achieve and accomplish anything in life because nothing is impossible. So, with that, we end our chapter for today. Your homework will be to jot down a summary, a 200-word summary in a fair in your fair notebook. Write it down in your own words, and you may give a character sketch on Lenko by reading, and you can take down the points from the screen which was displayed. Thank you. Please join in for the next chapter also, and thank you again.